Well, welcome to Quest Leadership Live, everybody. Still learning my way around a little bit of the streaming technology. So pretty glitchy opening there, but we'll get it figured out. I'm glad you joined me here today. My name is Tom Tony, and we're going to be talking today about coaching the next generation of leadership. Can't wait to share today's principle with you. I'm really excited about this topic today. Also want to just share with you a little bit of what's going to be going on next week with our here on the show. I'm excited to welcome our very first guests that will be here next week at the same time, 11:30. So do not miss the show next week. We're going to be talking live to Lamont Coleman. I'm excited to invite and share some time with my good friend LC. He's going to be here talking to us about coaching the next generation of students. We'll talk a little bit about what we're facing in our nation today, how we can kind of bring some unity in this moment, and talk about some of those tough topics, but talk about coaching the next generation. LC is a former NFL player. He now helps to run an organization in Miami. I'm excited to talk to him more about that. Been a part of the NFL college, playing at the college level, was a part of the Steelers, for those Steelers fans out there, Steeler Nation. So join me next week. This is a picture of him here from college. You can see him there on the right, number 42, LC, Lamont Coleman. And he's going to be here next week with us on Quest Leadership Live. I'm excited to have that conversation with him. Don't miss it, next Tuesday at 11:30 Eastern Time, which is our time every week. So gather around, grab your team, and let's talk about raising a strong next generation. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the struggle, the value of the struggle, the value of the struggle. One of the things that I believe is important for us is to understand that there's value in struggle. That when we struggle, like I struggled here today, just a little bit with getting everything up and going in terms of like the starting video, all of that. And you got to be front row seat to the struggle. But here's what I know is that I'm going from point A to point B. That my A right now is trying to get the technology together, everything to work exactly like it should. Point B is a smooth intro to this Quest Leadership Live. And we're not there yet, but where we are is we are in the struggle. So the struggle is where you build so many different parts of your character and your future success. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about the value of struggle for our students. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to watch our kids struggle. If you're a parent, you know this very well. When we strive to be good parents, sometimes it's really hard to watch our kids struggle. It's like we just want to jump in and rescue them. But the truth is that it's in the struggle where they are developing the muscle, not just for immediate success, but for all future successes. We are building into them these key components of continual, repeatable, sustainable success. So I want to share with you a little bit of what those are and just give you some encouragement as you go through these seasons. So don't forget to join me next week with LC. We're going to talk a little bit more about this and other topics. But today I want to get into what I consider to be the 5 key areas of the struggle and just one point of encouragement for you today, one practical step you can take away. Number 1 is we have to recognize that the struggle builds endurance. The struggle builds endurance. So our ability to endure is not built in the planning. It's not built in the winning. So all the time that we spend planning and strategizing and all that is very, very valuable. It's incredibly important, but that's not what builds endurance. Winning, crossing the finish line, celebrating, getting to that success is also a huge part of our reality. It's very, very important, but it's not what builds the endurance. What builds the endurance is everything in between. Getting from A to B, the struggle, struggling with ideas, struggling with concepts, struggling even physically to build something, do something, accomplish something. If you've ever exercised, if you've ever worked out, if you've ever trained, you know what I'm talking about. You go into the training, you say, I'm gonna do these exercises. That's the planning and the strategizing. And then there's the moment where you've done them and you can go, wow, wait, that was awesome. Great workout. And I'll celebrate the end of it. But it's the in between when we were actually doing the exercises that builds our endurance, our ability to endure. And specifically what we're looking for is to build our ability to endure for longer periods of time. Endurance. I can do it again and again and again for longer periods of time. I'm currently in this process right now. Been riding my bike a lot lately for the last few months. Logged over 200 miles last month and 17 rides. Just kind of getting started, 15, 20 miles a ride. I'm up to now about 25 miles per ride. But I didn't start out at 25 miles. I started out at like 7. And when I first started riding again, I rode quite a lot back in the day, but I enjoy cycling. And so as I started riding again, I started like at 7 miles. That's all I could get in. It's 7 miles. It's like, man, it's hard work. But 7 miles isn't my ultimate goal. It's not where I want to stop, but it's where I am, where I was at the time. And so over time, I built up to 14, 15, 16, broke the 18 mile threshold. Now I'm past the 20 mile threshold where every ride is over 20 miles, 20 to 25. And my goal is to get to where I can ride a couple times a week, up to 30 to 50 miles a day. And, but it's going to take time. And it's the struggle of the 7 miles that leads to the 14, that leads to the 25, that leads to the 50. So the struggle builds my ability to endure, our kids' ability to endure. The only way they're going to endure to greater things is to struggle where they are right now. Number 2, the struggle builds strength. And this might seem like, well, duh, but this is important. The struggle incorporates muscles that before we were struggling, were just laying dormant, weren't being used. Maybe that's the struggle of a skill. Maybe that's the struggle of knowledge. Maybe that's the struggle of relationships. Whatever it is that your students may struggle with, the struggle is what's going to help them build the strength to overcome that, to build relational strength, to build visionary strength, to build strategy strength. Wherever their weaknesses are, the struggle is going to help them to get stronger at accomplishing or busting through the barriers in that area. If again, I go back to either the cycling that I'm doing right now, or even in previous times when I was with a trainer, in the struggle to lift the weights and to do the exercise is actually what was making my muscles stronger. So the struggle builds strength as well. The third thing that we see here is that the struggle builds critical thinking. And I cannot overemphasize, no matter what I could do jumping jacks, I could jump up and down, I could scream it really loud, but nothing I could do could ever overemphasize enough the importance of helping our students to build critical thinking. Critical thinking is a major key, if not almost the key, to success. It is what today, the vast majority, we know statistically about 93%, that's almost everybody, 93% of employers today say, I will take someone who has strong critical thinking skills over someone who checks all the educational boxes. In other words, the undergraduate degrees, all the education that we could get that would fit that role specifically, are second. 93% of businesses say is second to someone who can think critically. What is critical thinking? It's problem solving. It's the ability to bust through a barrier, to see an issue and find resolution for it. Thinking critically. Thinking critically means I understand how my actions impact the outcome. Critical thinking. Critical thinking says I'm not going to do that because I realize, even though it might be a lot of fun and everybody else is doing it, the outcome could be dangerous, not what we wanted, could be destructive. Critical thinking. As we think about it in certain terms, if you think about it like in an archery term or those types of things, it's thinking beyond the target. What happens if I take this action and it doesn't work? What's the outcome? And it's thinking beyond just the immediate to the ramifications of what I'm about to do. Critical thinking. Critical thinking. If we can develop critical thinking into our students, and I'm telling you, this is a major component that is missing in a lot of people today and a lot of workers today, critical thinking. Critical thinking will drive us to get up in the morning. Critical thinking will drive us to be more kind and compassionate toward others. Critical thinking will cause us to not waste effort and energy on things that don't matter. Critical thinking is a major key to success, and we have to teach. And the struggle, especially in a healthy environment, the struggle teaches our kids critical thinking. Solve it, figure it out. As a parent, I have to do this often, and it's not easy. It's not easy to watch your kids struggle with something, no matter what it is. It could be putting Legos together. It could be cleaning the room. It could be building something. It could be navigating a tough relationship or conversation. And our natural tendency is to want sometimes just to jump in and go, here's what you do. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And when we do that, we remove the struggle. And when we remove the struggle, what are we removing? We're removing endurance, we're removing strength, and we're removing the component of critical thinking. It's much better to say, what do you think you should do? How would you solve that? I don't know. Just tell me. I know this is in you. Come on, let's think about the components here. What do you have? What do you have to solve? What's a potential answer? And allowing them to struggle with it. Because ultimately then, when they're able to solve it, it begins to produce other things in them. Critical thinking, I'm telling you, I know I'll spend a minute here on it, but it's because it really matters. Struggle builds critical thinking. Struggle also produces grit. What is grit? Grit is a little bit like ignorance, but it's a lot more like determination. Grit is the ability to stick with something until it's completed. Grit, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how hot it gets, no matter how tiresome it is, no matter how boring it is. Grit says, we're going. I'm determined and I'm driving through. We know, statistically, we know from research and studies that grit and critical thinking are two keys that work together to create success, especially in education. And especially if we're working with young students, that's one of the primary areas in which we see development is in education. In education, grit and critical thinking working together actually create an unstoppable student. If you can get a student to think critically and to have grit, there's not a whole lot they can't accomplish. Why? Because they will think critically about the solutions and they will push through until it's done. Grit and critical thinking. Grit is just like, I like to say it like grind. In fact, when I think of grit, I think of just grittiness, that grittiness to just, I'm going to dig in. It reminds me of, for those of you who would understand the reference, of Rocky in the meat locker, right? And he's working out and he's punching the meat locker. He's in there, he's working out, and he's running down the road in his gray sweats and running on the beach, and it's not pretty. And he's in a gym that it's kind of nasty and not pretty. But it's building in him this endurance and strength and the ability to stick with something until the job is done. Grit. We want our kids to have grit. Grit. Why? Well, because the struggle not only builds grit, but it also builds appreciation. One of the outcomes of the struggle is that we appreciate in a greater way the success and the victory. That by the time we get to that finish line, we recognize, and this is the part, you guys, that we want to praise. We recognize by the time we cross the finish line, not, wow, man, you're talented, you're gifted. Look at you. Look how special you are. Look how hard you worked. Look at the problems that you solved. Look at the grit that you used. Remember that critical thinking? Remember that problem you thought critically about that. And because of those components, look where it got you. Success is just the accumulation of these things. Grit, determination, critical thinking, hard work, resolve, endurance, strength. And success comes as a result of applying those things in our lives. So when our kids get to that point of success, that's what we want to praise. Wow. If we praise you're gifted, there's nothing they can do about that. How do you get better gifted? You don't. But you might be gifted. You might have some talent in there. But unless it's worked, it's not going to produce anything consistently in your life. And so at the end of the day, in the victory, we want to praise the struggle. Sounds counterintuitive because it sounds like we're praising hard times. Nah, it's not the hard times we're praising. It's the determination in the hard times. It's not the negativity of the situation that we're praising. It is the choosing to have a good attitude in the middle of negativity that we're praising. It is I'm struggling with this. Come on, it's in the struggle that you're going to get stronger. It's in the struggle you're going to get stronger endurance. I said this in last week's podcast. I said that if it's tough on you, it's working tough in you. If it's tough on you, it's helping you to be tough for the future. And that doesn't mean as coaches that we just let things go and overwhelm our students. We're there coaching them. And I'm often reminded of my personal coach. Every time I would go to the gym and I would work out, I would lift very heavy weights or do exercises that I did not like to do. Never one time did he ever do the exercise for me. Why? What good would it have done me? I'm the one that needed to struggle. He'd encourage me, coach me in technique, say, come on, you got to do it. Don't do it that way. You're going to strain something if you do it like that. He'd be there saying, come on, push it, push it, push it. You've got this, encouraging me, but he never lifted the weight for me. Why? Because I had to struggle. And if I make it through that struggle, I get stronger. And then finally, this is the last piece I want to encourage you with today. As leaders, what must we do then? I cannot overemphasize this enough. We have to find ways to introduce healthy struggle. Find ways to introduce healthy struggle. Absolutely strategize. Absolutely plan. Absolutely be clear up front with your students. Here's what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, why it matters, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, where we're going to do it. All those things. Be very, very clear up front in A. And in B, when they've gone through the process and they've gotten to success and they've checked the boxes, you've got to celebrate. You've got to say, job well done. Way to work it. Way to go. Good stuff. You got to do that. But we can't relent in the struggle in between because that's where they're building their strength. And we have to find ways to create healthy struggle. If you see something for your students that's just too easy, find a way to make it more of a challenge in a healthy way, but find a way to make it more of a challenge. Why? Because that's what's going to produce strength in them. Bump the expectation just a bit. Push the deadline up just a little bit. Add another task onto the plate. Don't have to necessarily tell them, say, I'm going to make this harder for you. But just say, hey, man, you're really doing great with this. You're really working hard. I'm going to add a little bit more in here and see what you do with it. And then watch as they just begin to consume the things that are around them as they grow in their strength and endurance and grit and critical thinking. Because ultimately, then they're going to appreciate the outcome so much more. So I want to encourage you with that today. There is strength in the struggle. There is value in the struggle. Let's focus for a season on creating healthy struggle. Love our students, encourage them, be there for them, cheer them on, instruct them in the ways that they do things and their technique and all of that, and then just let them struggle with it and grow in all these areas. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'd love to hear your feedback on this topic. Encourage you to join me next week. It's going to be a great conversation with Lamont Coleman. Can't wait to get in that conversation. Join me next week at 11:30 Eastern Time here on Facebook Live or over on YouTube for Quest Leadership Live. I thank you for joining me today, you guys, and we will see you next week.